In this video, I'm going to try to talk about the who, what, where, and when of the extraordinary phenomenon around Joseph the Hesychast and cave dweller, the elder Ephraim of Philithoa in Arizona. And I'll be using Elder Ephraim of Philithoa in Arizona's book as my source material. So let's start with Elder Joseph the Hesychast in the world as Francis. So Francis Cotes was born 1897 in Paros in the Cyclades, the Cyclades. Francis goes to Athens to work in 1914 at the age of 17. Francis joins the Navy in 1915. He's there for 2 years, and then he becomes a merchant at the age of 20. But he's been thinking of monasticism all this while. But the 1918 Balkan War, plus the Spanish flu, delayed his going to Mount Athos, which he finally did in 1921, and he's 24 years old now. At first, Francis tries the brotherhood of Elder Daniel of Katanakea. His dates are 1846 to 1929. Francis is living in a cave. Francis is a disciple of Elder Kalinikos for a while, 1853 to 1930 are his dates. Francis is near the Great Lavra, and Francis is attending the liturgy of a different Elder Daniel. This is Elder Daniel the Hesychast, and he's celebrating liturgies in the cell of St. Peter the Athonite. And Francis is at the Holy Forerunner near the Great Lavra. He's at the Holy Protection at Vigla, and he's staying with Father Hariton for a while, and this is all happening in 1 year. So Francis is on Mount Athos for 1 year as a layman, and that's 1921 to 1922. And then something happens. He meets Father Arsenios. Why? Because Elder Daniel of Katanakea sends Father Arsenios to meet Francis. Pause. So that was the early life of Francis in his first year on Mount Athos, but now I have to go back and give you the biographical background to Father Arsenios, and then we'll come back on track for their meeting. Right, so Father Arsenios was born in the world as Anastasios in northern Turkey. They fled. He was born in 1886. They all fled to the Caucasus from the Turks in 1898. He's aged 12. In 1910, he is born in his nephew Haralambos, and Anastasios becomes the godfather to his nephew. And at this stage, Anastasios is 24 years old. Right, what happens next? Anastasios, he's been wanting to pursue monasticism, so he goes to Jerusalem to do so, passing through Constantinople in 1910. And there, in Jerusalem, he joins the monastery of St. Salvos, and he takes the name Father Anatolios. And Father Anatolios goes as Father Anatolius now to Bethlehem, to a monastery there for a few years. Then he goes to Mount Athos, again through Constantinople. He needs the permissions from the Ottomans to get there. And he joins the monastery of Stavro Nikita for a few years. At the monastery of Stavro Nikita, Father Anatolius now takes the name Arsenios and becomes a great schema monk with that name. Then what happens? Now, Father Arsenios goes to consult with Elder Daniel of Katanakea, and it's now that Elder Daniel of Katanakea sends Father Arsenios to meet Francis the layman. And Father Arsenios is 12 years older than Francis the layman, and they strike that extraordinary deal whereby Father Arsenios will submit and become the disciple of the layman, Francis. So now it's the two of them, and we'll carry on with the narrative. So Father Arsenios, Francis, they've been living under remote guidance in obedience to Daniel of Katanakea for 2 or 3 years, but they need full discipleship. They need to live with elders. So Daniel of Katanakea sends them to join 2 elders of their own, and these elders are Elder Joseph and Elder Ephraim the barrel maker. And Elders Joseph and Ephraim the barrel maker are in Katanakea, and now it's at the end of 1923 when they do so. So it looks like we're going to be talking about a period coming up of 5 years. And in these 5 years, Francis and Father Arsenius are under the guidance of Elders Joseph and Ephraim the barrel maker in Katanakea. What's going to happen? A few things. I'm going to have to just quickly talk about the calendar issue, but we're really going to delve into that later. But what happens? 1924, pretty much straight away, the Church of Greece imposes the new calendar under the aegis of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. And the Holy Mountain takes a particular stance on this issue. They're going to not observe the new calendar. The Holy Mountain as a whole is going to observe the old calendar, but they will not sever themselves from the Ecumenical Patriarchate. Whereas there is an extreme position held by what we'll call, zealots, quote unquote. At Katanakea, they disagree with this position of the Holy Mountain, and they do sever themselves from commemorating the Ecumenical Patriarchate. They sever themselves from the Ecumenical Patriarchate and thereby the rest of the Holy Mountain. So the Zealot Fathers at Katanakea are out of step with the rest of the Holy Mountain. So why is that mentioned right here, right now? It's because Francis is tonsured in 1925, after a couple of years, taking the name Joseph as a great schemer monk, and it is with permission from the great Lavra, but that permission was given reluctantly due to the calendar issue. Right, what else happens during this period? Elder Joseph, the elder of elders, our Elder Joseph and Father Arsenius, he reposes, and Elder Ephraim the barrel maker, the remaining Elder Ephraim the barrel maker, move with Father Joseph and Father Arsenius, the new Father Joseph, our Father Joseph the Hesychgast, to a different location in 1928. They moved to St. Basil's Skeet, and St. Basil's Skeet is also in Katanakea. And what is St. Basil's Skeet? It has 8 huts. It's under the jurisdiction of the great Lavra, and as I said, they've moved in 1928. And also residing there is Father Matthew Karparthakis, and this ties into the calendar issue as well, because the later group known as Matthewites are followers of this Father Matthew, but that's in the future to come. So anyway, the Brotherhood consists of Elder Ephraim, now the barrel maker, our Father Joseph, the Hesychast, and Father Arsenius. They built their own huts. They prepared their own huts. They are being visited by Elder Sophrony, whom we know as being of Essex. Elder Sophrony, the disciple of St. Silouan at the monastery of Pantalaimon. Now, Father Ephraim, the barrel maker, he himself reposes. So both elders repose, Father Joseph and Father Ephraim, the barrel maker. And now, our Father Joseph, the Hesychast, becomes a proper elder at the age of 31 because he inherits the eldership of the reposed Father Ephraim. So at the end of that 5-year period, it's a bit of a landmark. Our Elder Joseph, the Hesychast, is a proper elder, so to speak, And now what happens, they spend a bit of time in 1929, that is our Elder Joseph and Father Arsenios, travelling outside of the Holy Mountain, seemingly for family purposes, but religiously for family purposes. You'll see what I mean shortly. Elder Joseph sponsors his mother to become a nun. She takes the name Agathangeli. What else? They visit Father Arsenios' sister, the nun Ephraxia. She's in Egina. They visit Father Arsenius' relatives in Drama. Elder Joseph meets a group of pious widows. They're all young widows. They've been widowed through the violence of Ataturk. He meets them in Thessalonica, and they become nuns under his guidance. And he continues that guidance via correspondence. And our Elder Joseph and Father Arsenius, they return to Mount Athos in September 1929. Right, now what happens? 1929 to 30, Elder Daniel of Kartanakia reposes. Also, Elder Daniel the Hesychgast reposes. Temporarily, our Elder Joseph and Father Arsenius become disciples of Father Anthony, who was a successor of Elder Daniel of Kartanakia, but that didn't work out. What else? Our Elder Joseph and Father Arsenius, they wander about. They wander about for 1.5 years looking for another elder. They hear about Saint Silouan at Panteleimon, but Father Arsenius doesn't want to embarrass his Elder Joseph, because if they went there, Father Arsenius can speak Russian. He would be speaking in Russian in front of his elder, and that would be embarrassing to his elder. So they declined to go to visit Saint Silouan. But they're visited many times by Elder Sophrony, the disciple of Saint Silouan. Next, 1930 to 1933, Elder Joseph goes to Drama. He restores a monastery to house his nuns in. He tonsors 5 nuns. The sisterhood have a rough time there. They're lied about to the bishop, and they're persecuted and pressured by the local bishop. The sisterhood are also threatened by partisan soldiers. And what else? From Drama, Elder Joseph has a vision of concern about his own brother in the flesh, Nicholas, who is in Athens. So Elder Joseph goes to Athens to visit his brother Nicholas. His brother Nicholas figures later on in our narrative. The sisterhood, meanwhile, move away from Drama to avoid that episcopal pressure, and they move to Uranopolis, just outside the Holy Mountain. And Elder Joseph returns to Mount Athos in 1933. So they're still living in isolation, still looking for spiritual guidance, looking for an elder. They spent time at St. Basil's Skeet in summer. They're on the summit of Mount Athos. In winter, they're in the chapel of the Panagia near the summit. And it is while they're at St. Basil's Skeet that Elder Joseph starts to doubt the extremity of some of Father Matthew's extreme views. Remember that they're all zealots here at this stage. All right, the Brotherhood. They're joined at St. Basil's Skeet by Father John from northern Epiros. Don't confuse him with our Elder Ephraim of Philithea and Arizona. It's a different John. And this Father John is the first layman to become a disciple of our Elder Joseph the Hesychast. What else? Joining them is Father Athanasius. And Father Athanasius is the aforementioned brother Nicholas in the flesh to Elder Joseph. And he joins them in 1933. He's 10 years younger than his older brother, Elder Joseph the Hesychast. Just leaping forward to a factoid, Father Athanasius, Elder Joseph's brother Nicholas, dies at New Skeet in 1983 at the age of 76. All right, come back to our narrative. Elder Joseph the Hesychgast is attracting many visiting fathers who come for spiritual advice. I'm going to whiz through a few names, and you can check these in the book. Father Ermolaus, Father Theokletos, Father Hierasimus Menagius, who had already been at St. Basil's Skeet from 1925. Father Athanasius, as we mentioned, another Father Athanasius Campanaus. In 1935, he's 68 years old. He's from the Great Lavra and later returns to the Great Lavra. There's Father Athanagoras Valsamakis, and visiting them is also Father Ephraim the Confessor in Volos. And here's a sidebar about Father Ephraim the Confessor in Volos. He's a leader of the Old Calendar movement in Volos, and he joins Elder Joseph at the small skeet of St. Anne, and then he is at another skeet at St. Anne's, and then leaping into the future, this Father Ephraim the Confessor from Volos travels Montreal, USA, dies in 1984. We'll be talking about this Father Ephraim the Confessor again a bit later. There's a Father Basil, and visiting him is Father Pantaleimon from Boston. Right. What else happens? Elder Joseph the Hesychgast makes a flying visit to Thessalonica to see the dying nun Theodora. I'm not going to talk about the other sisterhood and so on, but you can read about that in the book. I'm going to concern myself with the Holy Fathers on Mount Athos here. And now we're going to pause to talk about another figure, and that's Papa Ephraim of Katonakia. So Papa Ephraim of Katonakia is a disciple of Papa Nikephoros, and with him is Father Procopius, who is also a disciple of Father Nikephoros. So they live with their elder, Papa Nikephoros. Now, Papa Ephraim of Katonakia, he's born in 1912 and joined Papa Nikephoros in 1933 at the age of 21. And he meets Elder Joseph in 1935. And Papa Ephraim becomes a priest in 1936, and he starts to visit St. Basil's Skeet to serve the liturgy for them at St. Basil's Skeet. And Papa Ephraim of Katonakia becomes a spiritual disciple of Elder Joseph, but he remains by agreement under the formal discipleship and resides with his elder Nikephoros. And leaping into the future, this Papa Ephraim of Katonakia dies in 1998. So anyway, back to our narrative. It's 1936, St. Basil's Skeet, and the brotherhood with Elder Joseph consists of only Father Arsenius, Father Joseph's brother, now Father Athanasius, and Father John. Now, at this point, the book pauses to describe what happens next, because in early 1938, they leave St. Basil's Skeet and move to the small skeet of St. Anne, which is near St. Anne's Skeet, and Papa Ephraim of Katonakia helps him to move. And at this stage, Elder Joseph is gaining the reputation for being deluded. We'll talk a little bit about why, but part of it is according to the rigour of their schedule at the small skeet of St. Anne's. It seems incredibly extraordinary to the rest of the monks of Mount Athos. And because of that reputation for delusion, the Elder Paisius the New, the famous one that we all know of, wants to visit him, wants to visit Elder Joseph the Hesychgast, but is deterred from doing so by others who say, no, he's deluded, don't go. But Elder Paisius later realizes that was a mistake when he reads the writings of Elder Joseph the Hesychgast. Just mention a young monk, Father Ionakios, from the Brotherhood of Papa Ananias at the Heart of the Holy Cross. They had 10 brothers, and they were at St. Anne's Skeet. This young monk, Father Ionakios, is receiving spiritual training from Elder Joseph the Hesychgast, but Father Ionakios soon dies of tuberculosis. Now, while the Brotherhood are at the small skit of St. Anne's, we've got to talk about the German occupation. So, just a bit of history. Italy declares war on the 28th of October 1940, gives rise to Woche Day. German occupation in 1941, what did that mean? 300,000 Greeks die of starvation in the cities that, in that year, 1941 to 2. So you can see that the economy is really paralysed, I'd say, and that affects the Brotherhood at St. Anne's Skeet. We'll talk about why shortly. But having moved to the small skit of St. Anne's in 1938, the book that I'm using kind of has a book within a book at this point. The book within a book at this point talks about the life, the way of life, the daily life at the small skit of St. Anne's, and it's packed with spiritual counsel as well. So on the surface of it, it looks like we're going to jump over a lot of years, which we are, but that's the reason why the narrative is switching from historical detail to describing daily life and describing spiritual events. Right, they're going to be at the small skit of St. Anne's for 15 years. So that's from 1938 to 1953. In 1947, they're joined by Father Joseph from Cyprus, and he is to be the later Elder Joseph of Vatapedi. And the strange thing is that now, because of the Greek Civil War and the economic deterioration thereby, the economy of this Brotherhood at the small skit of St. Anne's is based on their woodcraft carving of crosses, and these weren't selling. So although Father Joseph of Cyprus, the future Elder Joseph of Vatapedi, joins the Brotherhood, he is sent out to work at the monasteries in the fields and only visiting the small skit of St. Anne when he can. So he joined in 1947, and this disorder continued until 1953 when it abated. And then Father Joseph of Cyprus was able to settle and reside permanently at the small skit of St. Anne's. Right, what next happens? Now we have to talk about our Elder Ephraim of Philadelphia in Arizona and talk about his life. And he was born Ioannis Johnny Moretis in Volos, from Volos. He was born in 1928. Future, he died 2019. Now, he was a disciple of Elder Ephraim the Confessor of Volos that we had mentioned before. And Elder Ephraim the Confessor was a disciple of Elder Joseph the Hesychgast, and he goes as a Hierom monk during the German occupation, so from 1941. He goes to one of the two old calendar churches in Volos, and that's where Johnny Moretis meets him. And not only does he meet him, he becomes a spiritual child. Johnny Moretis becomes a spiritual child of Elder Ephraim the Confessor in Volos. And this is from the ages of 14 to 19. The young Johnny wants to become a monk, but his elder Ephraim the Confessor dissuades him from going to Mount Athos, saying that he needs Johnny to stay with him to help him build a monastery. And that goes on for 5 years. And in 1947, same year that Elder Joseph of Cyprus, Father Joseph of Cyprus, joined the Brotherhood. In 1947, the young Johnny sends a gift to Elder Joseph of Hesychgast at St. Anne's, small St. Anne's Skeet, and it's a gift of some pasta, some food, and that's no small gift at that time. And then Johnny finally gets the blessing on September the 26th, 1947, to go to young Johnny finally gets the blessing of Elder Ephraim to go to Mount Athos, and he joins the Brotherhood of Elder Joseph the Hesychgast at Small St. Anne's Skeet on September the 26th, 1947. In the meantime, Papa Ephraim of Katonakia is continuing to liturgize for them. Remember, they're all still zealots, so to speak. What else? At the Small Skeet of St. Anne, life is very rough. There's very little water, for example. Now, our young Johnny Moretis, after 9 months only, is tonsured into the great schema and takes the name Ephraim, by which we know him now, and that happens on July the 13th, 1948. But because they're so-called zealots, they're not on the official roster of Mount Athos, and this becomes significant later. All right, what's their way of life? Well, wooden crosses is their product. They make 8 to 10 of them each day. In 1949, the police are looking for Johnny Moretis to do his military service because his tonsure isn't registered or recognised. That's the name by which they know him. And Elder Joseph hides Johnny Moretis, our Elder Ephraim, in a cave until the danger has passed. Elder Ephraim the Confessor from Volos visits. That's our Elder Ephraim's former elder. But our Elder Ephraim refrains from talking through discipline, guards his tongue. What else? After a few months at the Small Skeet of St. Anne's, our young Elder Ephraim, his health deteriorates due to the harsh conditions and the harsh ascesis. He gets first-stage tuberculosis. So Yeronda Joseph, the Hesychast, makes him eat well, eat butter, and even eat meat. And then a few years later, young Elder Ephraim gets anthrax, and by this stage, Yeronda Joseph the Hesychast is allowing medical treatment because formerly, as Francis, he had been hard set against doctors and medical treatment. So that's life at the Small Skeet of St. Anne's for about 11 years, but now we're going to backtrack and we're going to talk about the calendar issue, and this will be quite detailed and take quite a bit of time. So anyway, Government of Greece adopts a new calendar by royal decree in 1923 on the 18th of January, and at that time the Ecumenical Patriarchate asks the churches of Greece, Alexandria, Cyprus, Antioch, and Romania to adopt the new calendar, and the Church of Greece, as we said, does adopt it in 1924 on the 10th of March. Alexandria, Antioch, Romania, and Bulgaria follow suit. And that means that the old calendarists have no bishop, and they have no bishop for 11 years until 1935. So what happens? In 1935, Archbishop Chrysostomus Kavoridis of Florina joins the old calendarists, and he's followed by Bishop Germanos of Demetriados and Chrysostomus of Zakynthos. So the old calendarists have got 3 bishops. And these 3 bishops make 4 new bishops. Now they've got 7. And one of the new bishops is the monk Matthew Karparthakis of St. Basil's Skeet, known to Elder Joseph the Hesychast that we referred to earlier. So these 7 bishops are disputing with each other for a couple of years. Most lay people are siding with the old calendar at this time. And then, in 1937, Bishop Chrysostomus of Florina declares and proclaims for himself his following position, being a position of objection from within the Church of Greece, and that the mysteries of the Church of Greece are to be accepted. Now, in English, they're using words like valid or having grace, but I'm just going to use the word accepted or rejected, that kind of thing. So the position of Archbishop Chrysostomus at this stage is a quote-unquote moderate one, whereas Bishop Matthew and the zealots with him, their position is more extreme. What do? They anathematize Bishop Chrysostomus of Florina, and what else do? They reject the mysteries of the Church of Greece. For them, the mysteries of the Church of Greece are unacceptable. What else is happening? Mount Athos, as we said, remains on the old calendar, but they will still commemorate the Ecumenical Patriarch, unlike the Zealots, who will not commemorate the Ecumenical Patriarchate. Vatapedi flipped temporarily to the new calendar, but went back to the old. Elder Joseph the Hesychast is convinced by the extreme Zealot position that Bishop Matthew encourages him to take. So what does he do? Elder Joseph the Hesychast sends a diatribe to Bishop Chrysostomus of Florina condemning the mysteries of the Church of Greece. So in 1937, something happens. Elder Joseph the Hesychast and Papa Ephraim of Kathanakia both have visions, and these visions cause them to revise their position, their extreme position, their zealot position on Bishop Chrysostomus, and they apologize to Bishop Chrysostomus, and their apology is accepted by Bishop Chrysostomus. So that means that Elder Joseph the Hesychast now accepts both the old and also the new calendars. And that is the state of things at the small skete of St. Anne's when Johnny Moretis, our future Elder Ephraim, joins them in 1947. So the brotherhood at the small skete of St. Anne's, including the newly joined Father Joseph the Cypriot, are accepting that moderate position. Then what happens? Well, in 1950, there's an encyclical published by the old calendar bishops, Chrysostomus of Florina, Germanus of Kyklades, Christopher of Christianopolis, and Polycarp of Diavlia. And in this encyclical, they now say that the new calendar's mysteries are unacceptable, i.e. the Church of Greece's mysteries are unacceptable. And they say that anyone baptized by the new calendar must be received by chrismation now in the call it true, quote-unquote, Orthodox Church. There is a sting in the tail here. Bishop Chrysostomus signed this encyclical unwillingly, declaring he signed what he didn't believe. So this comes as a shock to Elder Joseph the Hesychast, and it comes as a shock to his brotherhood as well. So what happens? Fathers Arsenius, Athanasius, Papa Ephraim, and Elder Nikiforos, they resist strongly to Elder Joseph the Hesychast's change of mind, because that shock, because that caused a change of mind on the zealot issue. So Fathers Arsenius, Athanasius, Papa Ephraim, and Elder Nikiforos strongly want to remain zealot, whereas the younger ones, Father Joseph the Cypriot and our Father Ephraim, the former Johnny Moretis, are quick to obey their Elder Joseph the Hesychast and follow his change of mind. So what is this change of mind? Yeronda Joseph the Hesychast, he sends Father Athanasius to submit the brotherhood now to the great Lavra and the Ecumenical Patriarchate, no longer zealots, to be registered along and to be in step with the rest of Mount Athos. Now, I know we're talking about the calendar issue as a sidebar away from our narrative, but now I have to have a sidebar from the sidebar and talk about ordinations. So while they were still zealots, and only Papa Ephraim of Kathanakia was serving them, Yeronda Joseph the Hesychast intended Father Haralambos, whom we haven't really spoken about yet, to be a priest, and Father Ephraim of our Father Ephraim, Johnny Moretis, to be a deacon, so that they can have their services and not just rely on Papa Ephraim of Kathanakia. So his plan is to send these two, Father Haralambos, who I'll talk about soon, and our Father Ephraim. He wants to send them to Bishop Chrysostomus of Florina. He wants to send them off the Holy Mountain. But because they're not yet registered with the Holy Mountain, it would be dangerous for Father Ephraim to leave the Holy Mountain because the police are still looking for him to make him do his military service. On the morning of their departure from Daphne, the port of Daphne, Yeronda Joseph, the Hesychgast, calls it off because he has a vision that they shouldn't do it. All right, so now, having his change of mind from being full-blown zealot to being now wanting to not just even be moderate zealot, but to cast his lot in with the Holy Mountain, Yeronda Joseph the Hesychgast sends our Father Ephraim and another monk to be registered on the Holy Mountain, and he sends them to Piraeus, and this would allow them to be ordained on the Holy Mountain. So that happens, they go there and they're registered. Then what happens? Father Haralambos and our Father Ephraim now go to the Great Lavra for permission for their ordinations, and they were ordained by Bishop Erathios, and Father Haralambos is ordained a deacon on Saturday on a Saturday in 1952, and then a priest on the following Sunday. And on that Sunday, our Elder Ephraim is ordained a deacon, and he's only 23 and a half years old at this stage. And interesting note, at the age of 80 years old, that Bishop Erathios takes up the invitation to visit the Brotherhood at their small skeet of St. Anne. And leaping into the future, our Father Ephraim, our Elder Ephraim, is a deacon for 3 years, serving with Father Haralambos at the small skeet of St. Anne's, and then our Elder Ephraim becomes a priest after those 3 years. So what else happened in the meantime? Papa Ephraim of Katanakia, he remains with the Zealots because his elder Nikiforos remains with the Zealots, and he remains so out of respect to his elder until his elder's repose in 1975. Now I can talk about Father Haralambos. Right, so 5 months after Elder Joseph sided with the monasteries of Mount Athos and ceased taking some kind of zealot position, 5 months after that, Father Haralambos joins their brotherhood in 1950. At first, they aren't commemorating the Patriarch, but until sometime leaping into the future at New Skeet, they do. Right now, anyway, Father Haralambos. Well, we did speak about him. He was born in Russia in 1910 as the nephew of our Father Arsenios, and he was born in Russia because, of course, the family fled there as refugees from the 1880s. And Haralambos is the godson of Father Arsenios as well. Haralambos goes to Drama at when he's 12 years old. They all have relatives there. Now, and in his late 20s, Haralambos serves in the army, and he's fighting the Italians in 1940. He's undergoing the German occupation in 1941. The Bulgarians are controlling Macedonia and Thrace, obviously Drama. And as a layman, Haralambos is leading the Old Calendar movement there until 1950, and he, just like Elder Joseph, the Hesychgast, is disillusioned by the encyclical of their eminences Chrysostomus, Hieromanus, Christopher, and Polycarp. So he throws in the towel and says, "No, I'm leaving. I'm going to be a monk now. I'm just going to be a monk." So he arrives on the Holy Mountain on the 13th of September. He's 40 years old in 1950, and he joins his uncle, Father Arsenius, and the Brotherhood at the small skeet of St. Anne's, and he becomes a novice after 10 days. So that was life at the small skeet of St. Anne's, 1938 to 1953, and it covered the German occupation, it covered the war period, it covered the calendar issues, the 1950 encyclical, and so on. Now, the Brotherhood at the small skeet of St. Anne's, they have a visitor, a frequent visitor, Father Theophylactus, and Father Theophylactus was a Rasifor monk, and he was under Elder Joachim Spezieris, in the heart of the Holy Mercenaries at a different place at New Skeet. Now, the life of the Brotherhood at the small Skeet of St. Anne's was ruining their health, and Father Theophylactus encouraged them to move with him to New Skeet. What else happens? Yeronda Joseph the Hesychast taunts his father Theophylactus as a great schemer monk at St. Anne's, small Skeet of St. Anne's, but Father Theophylactus remains residing at New Skeet. And just leaping into the future, Father Joseph the Cypriot is sent to live with Father Theophylactus in 1951. He's there for 8 years until the repose in 1959 of our Elder Joseph the Hesychast. So what happens? They do move to New Skeet, and this is 1953. And where is New Skeet? Well, it's in between St. Anne's Skeet and St. Paul's Monastery, 1 mile from each. And it's famous for having the Colivades fathers lived there, including St. Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain, and is under the jurisdiction of St. Paul's Monastery. And they are given 5 huts to live in. So the Brotherhood of Small Skeet of St. Anne is given 5 huts to live in at New Skeet, and after first staying with Father Theophylactus, and they regain their health. They're visited for a short while by Father Alexios, who's 18 years old. He stays with them briefly, but he is a demoniac and seems to be having well, no, we can't say that. Anyway, that's it. They are now at New Skeet, 1953. What happens now? Elder Joseph the Hesychast health issues in his 50s, his years. He has hypoalbuminemia, and that's causing swelling. He gets anthrax. It takes him a year to recover from that. That's in 1957, December. And he's having heart attacks from cardiac insufficiency. And in 1959, so 6 years later, he reposes on the feast of the Dormition. And what else? Father Timothy shares hut with Father Haralambos, and later with Father Ephraim, and Father Pantaleimon of Boston is making visits to them. Right now, we're nearly at the end of the narrative. We're going to end it because Elder Joseph the Hesychast has reposed now, and we'll just touch on what the background is of what happens to his spiritual disciples. You can get more information about them from elsewhere, from other sources. Now, just note about the demographics of Mount Athos. In 1921, 5,500 monks. In 1959, at the repose of Elder Joseph the Hesychast, 2,500 monks, and in 1971, 1,145 monks. So they're dwindling in number, and they're also an aging population. And I think I have to say something about this. The reputation for delusion, for the rigours of the asceticism that Elder Joseph the Hesychast was leading, especially at the small Skeet of St. Anne's, for example. It's kind of understandable with the older population in the large monasteries living idiorhythmically, and I think that demographic background explains why and how a lot of younger monks were flocking to the disciples of Elder Joseph the Hesychast, actually because of their great asceticism. And the spiritual children of Elder Joseph the Hesychast, that's Elder Haralambos, Father Joseph the Cypriot, later of Vatapedi, our Elder Ephraim of Philitheo in Arizona. I'm going to add, not in this book, but Father Macarius from Philitheo at Skeet Skiti Maruda outside Carais. They were attracting their own brotherhoods. So Elder Haralambos and his brotherhood went to reinvigorate the monastery of Dionisio. Father Joseph, the Cypriot, did the same, took his brotherhood reinvigorate life at Vatopedi Monastery. Our elder Ephraim went to Philotheo, of course, and also his spiritual children reinvigorated life at Herapotomo, Constantinople, Caracaló, and that is the end of our narrative. That principally described the life on Mount Athos from 1921 to 1959, the principal figures and the locations and the background of events, obviously the war years, the German occupation, the Greek Civil War, and of course the calendar issue.